What's wrong with Canada's left? That's the question posed by one half of Maclean's dueling magazine covers in a piece that doesn't really have much to do with the actual left. So, joining me by phone to share her real left wing perspective on a number of issues is freelance journalist Nora Loreto, who also co hosts the podcast Sandy and Nora, which you can find at sandyandnora.com. Nora, welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So, this Maclean's piece. Now, well, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's honestly kind of boring. But they have these dueling covers. One is What's Wrong with the Right. The other is What's Wrong with the Left. And I read the What's Wrong with the Left one. It's there's like half of the articles about guns for some reason. There's immigration, multiculturalism, some economic issues sprinkled in. But the whole piece was really told from a right-leaning perspective, which for a lot of the Canadian media is how they tend to approach left-wing issues. So what were your thoughts on just that piece?
Yeah, I think that what they got right was the question that they posed. That there might be some issues with the left, and then as they started to try to answer that question, it fell completely flat. Maclean's is stuck in a logic that a lot of journalists in Canada are stuck in, which is that Justin Trudeau and the current Liberal Party is the left, and that means that the right is the Conservative Party and Andrew Scheer. And there's a whole bunch of problems with that conception. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is it's not true. Some people immediately say, well, the old political spectrum of left and right doesn't exist anymore. It's not relevant. But it's how we are moving the goalposts that matters. That what was considered left wing or right wing even 30 years ago is now actually kind of either considered really centrist for the right or for the left, and then for the right it's gone quite a bit further right. So it's set up an important question and failed to knock down any of the pins.
Yeah, so this is something that I notice with a lot in big media outlets is I'm not even sure if it's so. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Do you think it's ignorance, or do you think it's by design? Are they purposely silencing real left-wing perspectives, or is it just they think that Trudeau is a left-winger and that's kind of what they sell?
No, when it comes to someone whose job is analysis of politics, it's by design. It's not ignorance. I think that you do see ignorance come into play where, the education system doesn't really grapple with left-wing issues very well. A lot of left-wing issues within the education system are kind of passed off as common sense. So, you might have more studies in elementary school talking about how dad might help with the housework and cooking, right? And that's not a left-wing ideal. That's common sense. And a lot of these things are common sense, right? A lot of left-wing ideas are common sense.
Yeah.
But from the political class, from journalists, it's quite intentional because what it does is it creates a lot of space for us to talk about the conservatives, right? The Big Tent Conservative Party that on one end you have the red Tories who might be embodied by someone like Kim Campbell or someone like Michael Chong, member of Parliament Michael Chong for Wellington Halton Hills. And then on the right wing of that Big Tent Party, you have someone who might be more like Andrew Scheer, who's a religious conservative who has quite extreme conservative views, really, if you consider the red Tory position, which would be pro-public health care and making sure people are given what they need to survive. And then on the right of that, of course, is the space that's been opened up by Maxime Bernier and his new political party, which is far right. So there's a lot of air that gets taken up talking about the right. When the left is the Liberal Party, and of course the Liberal Party is a Big Tent party as well, then it completely marginalizes what's left of the Liberal Party. And as someone who's left of the NDP, it is so fascinating to see how mainstream political commentators and journalists not only have no idea what's going on the left, but have no tools to be able to explain it to the people who they're supposed to explain it to, right? At the very core of what their job is, it's supposed to explain these political ideas to the people who read them or who watch them and say, oh, that's interesting, or oh, I don't like that. But they don't even have the vocabulary, the analysis, the history. They don't have the contacts. And it comes across, as someone on the left, when I read these kinds of things, as fiction, basically.
Yeah. So there really is this. You kind of touched on it, where there's almost this. We don't question the system that's in place. So you describe yourself as being left of the NDP. For people listening at home, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, for me, that means that I don't actually put much time into partisan politics. I think that the power that exists for left-wing movements exists outside of the formal political process. It's that our job as citizens to get together and to have campaigns and to have events together and push politicians to do certain things, whether it's the NDP, the Liberals, or the Conservatives. And I believe in policies that the NDP either sometimes will say they agree to on paper, or that they don't agree to on paper, like free education, free higher education, policies like nationalizing certain Canadian industries, and a real radical transition off oil. Like I'm from Southern Ontario. I lived in Toronto for 10 years. I got to say, I played today with my kids in the snow for 3 hours, and the snow here, I live in Quebec City, there's 3 feet of it. Like my kids were walking up to their waist in snow.
Yeah.
And you just think, oh my goodness, my parents keep saying that it hasn't really snowed in Georgetown. So there's a lot of issues that are really pressing, and I do believe that with political courage, we can have radical transformation that doesn't leave anybody behind. That really does make sure that someone who's working in an industry that needs to be transitioned out of existence will not be left behind. But we don't have any politicians in the NDP, or certainly not the Liberals and the Conservatives, that are talking like that right now.
Yeah, and I think the lack of having that sort of figure in media, in politics, it makes it harder to have these conversations, because it seems like they're these these sideline conversations that really not many people agree with. But I think if you were to pose the ideas that you have as what being a left-winger in Canada means, I feel that a lot of people would agree with you. It's just that these ideas aren't really exposed to people. So what are your thoughts on, since we touched on it, on Jagmeet Singh and the current iteration of the NDP?
Oh, yeah, this has not been a good week for Singh. There's been 2 interviews that he's done kind of with the hook of the by-election that he's running in right now, which, of course, is supposed to secure his seat in the House of Commons. And the position that he's taken, number one, in favor of the LNG pipeline in northern British Columbia, in favor of upholding the quote-unquote rule of law, which basically justified the RCMP cracking heads at the camp at Wet'suwet'en. It's unfortunately, it's not him alone. It's the trend of the party that has been going on for many years. It was started under Jack Layton, trying to make the party sound more reasonable, sound more liberal, sound more accessible to people, but they actually managed to do the exact opposite. I'm in Quebec, and there's an actual left-wing party that has seats in our provincial legislature, and the tremendous power that this party, that this group of people has to challenge corruption, to challenge bad decisions of the Liberal government, to challenge the new government, certainly on their kind of racist and xenophobic rhetoric around immigration. It makes such a difference, because it opens up these spaces for average people to say, yeah, why not free higher education? Why not, high-speed rail that's electrified, that will connect cities, not just the 2 main cities in the province, but reaching people outside of the urban centers? Why not promise to get us off of combustion engine cars in 20 years? Like, why isn't that a completely out of the question possibility? And it's like, well, then you start saying, well, Norway's done it, and Norway is fine.
Exactly.
There's not a single one of these policies doesn't exist somewhere else in the world, right? Free higher education is the norm in a lot of parts of the world.
Yep.
And unfortunately, when you don't have journalists with a perspective that these things are possible, and you don't have politicians pushing these things forward as being possible, the real losers, of course, is the average person who's, how can you know that college in Quebec is free? You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So since we touched on Jagmeet Singh, I also want to touch on the other leaders. I want to get your thoughts on them. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, what do you make of his government so far?
Oh, I mean, like, you see the raging conservatives who are like, oh, we hate this guy. This guy's pretty boy, all this stuff. It's most of it's sexist and homophobic and all this stuff. But the anger and how mad they are with Justin Trudeau, I feel that anger. This is a government that is into photo ops, that is willing to do something if it looks good in front of the camera, but that doesn't do much more than that when it comes to fundamental systemic change. The gender parity cabinet, that was a big deal in 2015. Has it materially improved the lives of women in Canada? No. We still don't have a national public childcare system. It's tough because a lot of what he got elected on was fear of re-electing Stephen Harper. And I think a lot of people have been very disappointed with Justin Trudeau. I think the last couple of months have not been great months for him. Like, there's been a lot of difficult issues that he's been trying to navigate. And I think that if he wins in 2019, it'll probably be again out of fear for what Andrew Scheer might deliver.
Yeah.
So Andrew Scheer, I don't think will be as easily demonized as Stephen Harper.
Yeah. So that's because this is something I've been thinking about this year's election, because I agree with you. I think Trudeau won because Harper was so terrible, and I feel like it's a year that people would be willing to vote for a different party if there was an option out there that made sense. But I mean, Andrew Scheer, if for people that don't like Trudeau, I don't know how you could take Andrew Scheer. This guy, for me, is even more phony. What are your thoughts on him and his version of the party?
I had the opportunity to cover the leader debate when it was in Quebec City, and so that was, there was how many members of that race? 15 people, I guess. And Andrew Scheer that night, and this was in French too, so it was a bit of a difficult debate because almost none of them spoke French, or very few of them spoke French. Andrew Scheer came across very good. Like, it was after that night that I was able to be pretty confident in a bet, and I bet on him, and I won a beer.
Nice.
He's inoffensive. He's got a charm. Like, I'm not going to call him charming, and I don't actually want people to say, I know what you were saying.
Yeah.
He's not charming, but he has a charm to him. And he plays very, very well to the base of the Conservative Party. He's the kind of person that, you don't have to plug your nose and vote Conservative if you're a Conservative. Apparently there are people plugging their nose with Doug Ford and voting for the Progressive Conservatives, but you don't have the same effect with Andrew Scheer. I think he's a lot more dangerous than people are giving him credit for.
Okay.
And you're going to see a rise of the Conservative Party in Quebec. I don't know if the rise is going to be big enough, to make a big difference across Canada, but it will definitely be bigger than the Harper years.
So I guess the last leader here, or I don't know, kind of a leader, Maxime Bernier and his White People's Party, or I should say People's Party, but White People's Party.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bernier?
You know what? Before we throw to Bernier, I have to mention Elizabeth May has been doing very good work. Right? Like, I heard her yesterday morning on the radio, and her intervention was very, very good. I've been more and more impressed with Elizabeth May. I've never been a huge fan of the Green Party, but as the party's evolved and gotten bigger and gotten, its sea legs, I guess, political sea legs.
Yeah.
I've been very impressed with Elizabeth May, and so I think that what she offers in 2019 might be that alternative. The battle between the NDP and the Greens will be fascinating, especially based on what happens in British Columbia. Of course, those two parties are kind of, in the battle for government, for staying alive.
I should mention, too, in 2015, seeing Elizabeth May in a debate is the very reason I chose to run as a Green Party candidate for an MP spot. So, yeah, Elizabeth May, I think, is fantastic. But, on Maxime Bernier, I don't know. What are your thoughts on Bernier and his potential to grow a party?
Yeah, Bernier is a real problem. He's a problem because he's flashy, and the national media loves writing about him. Right? They've already done 2 profiles of 2 completely random folks that are running for his party. That, if all things were equal, they would never have made any articles, let alone national articles. Bernier, a lot of folks outside of Quebec don't know. He represents a riding that is very, very white. It's rural. It's a riding that relies on the dairy industry, and his opposition to the dairy industry is kind of a funny little fit. But his father was a very popular politician, and so basically what Bernier has been a riding handed to him through his father. He's going to probably win. It's not a sure bet, he didn't even win the leadership in his own riding when he ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party. But he is a lock on that riding, and so it would be surprising if he lost. The real question will be, does he have another seat? Does he get another representative elected? And that's anyone's guess. When you have a person accused of racist hate crimes get 13% of the vote in Mississauga, you have a white nationalist get come in third place in the Toronto election. We're in very scary times, and if Bernier is smart, which is by all accounts not the case, he will find a popular fringe person to win a riding somewhere in Canada. And so, but the worst impact is going to be it normalizes hate speech. It's going to normalize anti-immigrant, anti-trans, homophobic, sexist speech, and the media is not going to know how to help themselves to not cover it.
Yeah. All right. Before we go here, I have to get your thoughts on Doug Ford because he's just such a character.
Yeah.
So what are your overall thoughts on Ford and what he's done so far?
Oh my goodness. I think that we've only started to see the beginning of what's to come, and I think that the province is going to be in for a fight. I think that people have to figure out how to fight against the privatization of the healthcare system, the overhaul of the education system that is surely coming. He's going to gut workers' rights. That's all of this is anyone's guess, but based on what's already happened in the last 6 months, it's pretty clear that he's looking to slash and burn and really hurt people in the province. The thing that I'm just constantly in sorrow over is how many conservatives thought that it would be okay. And at some level, we've got Amanda Simard, who left the party over standing up for Franco-Ontarian rights. That's not enough. There has to be a reckoning, public reckoning of people who are members of the Progressive Conservative Party to say, we don't support this. Because unless you want to see another Walkerton, unless you want to see another death of social services or social assistance, like what happened with that woman named Kim in Sudbury, under Mike Harris, this will happen again, and it will be even worse, and it'll be even harder to undo. So I'm happy to not be in Ontario, only because I know the fight back seems like it's impossible, but it has to happen.
One more question before we go, actually. What do you think people at home can do to kind of help change the conversation and pull the conversation more towards the left, as you described right now, people think that Trudeau is left when he is not. What can people at home do? Do you think getting involved in politics is the answer, or activism the answer? What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I think that you have to take stock about what kind of access you have. So are you in a community where there's a campaign against something that you're interested in? Get involved, go to those meetings, meet new people. If there is an issue, like anything from saving your library to fighting the cuts at your local hospital, you can start a committee. You can do that thing by word of mouth through Facebook. You can rent rooms for free, usually in your local library. Get active in some way. And, be in touch with the journalists that you read. I think people don't necessarily think that they can email the people that they read. As someone that gets emails all the time, I can tell you they're 100% really angry people who hate me. And so, but if I'm engaged in a way in good faith with someone saying, oh, I don't know why did you know about this, left-wing perspective that doesn't seem to get into your articles, you can engage with folks, especially if it's a smaller newspaper or local radio station, local television station. So have your voice heard, make your voice heard, because there's an angry group of right-wing folks within this country that are making their voice heard, and they're making an impact, unfortunately, on how we're covering and what we're covering in this country.
Yep. All right. Nora Loreto is a freelance journalist and co-host of the podcast Sandy and Nora, which you can find at sandyandnora.com. Nora, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for the invite.